Chosen one, there is a particular kind of ache that comes with waiting. The ache of watching everyone around you seem to move forward while you feel like you are standing still. Friends get engaged, timelines fill up with weddings and baby announcements, and somewhere in the quiet of your own life, a question keeps surfacing. Why not me? Why not yet? If you have ever lain awake turning that question over, know this: you are not alone, and you are not broken. What you are in is a season, and seasons, by their nature, are not permanent. They are also not empty, even when they feel that way. It is easy to treat singleness as a waiting room, chosen one, a place you pass through on the way to the real part of your story. But a waiting room implies that nothing of value happens while you sit in it. That framing does you a disservice. The truth is that a season on your own can be one of the most formative chapters you will ever live. Not because solitude is inherently magical, but because of what solitude makes possible: undivided attention, honest self-examination, and the freedom to build a life on your own terms before you learn to build one alongside someone else. Culture has a way of treating relationship status as a scoreboard. Married, partnered, seeing someone, single. As if these were rungs on a ladder and the goal is simply to keep climbing. Under that lens, singleness looks like a deficiency, something to be corrected as quickly as possible. But a life measured only by its relationship status is a thin life, chosen one. The people you admire most, for their wisdom, their groundedness, their capacity to love well, usually got that way through experience, reflection, and time spent knowing themselves, not simply through partnership. This does not mean partnership is unimportant, or that wanting companionship is somehow a lesser desire to be talked out of. Longing for connection is human and good, but it is worth separating the desire for connection from the fear of being alone, because those two things pull you toward very different decisions. One draws you toward people who are actually right for you. The other can push you toward anyone who happens to be available. Learning to tell the difference is some of the most important work you will ever do, and it is work that is much easier to do without the daily pressure of managing someone else's needs and expectations. There is a reason so many people who look back on formative periods of growth, recovering from a loss, starting over in a new city, working through a hard year, describe those periods as painful but clarifying, chosen one. Difficulty strips away the noise. It forces you to figure out what you actually believe, what you actually need, and who you actually are underneath the roles you play for other people. Singleness can do something similar, not because being alone is inherently difficult, but because it removes one of the biggest sources of distraction and self-definition that most adults have: a partner's opinions, needs, and presence shaping the rhythm of daily life. When you are not answering to anyone else's schedule, moods, or expectations, you get an unusually clear look at your own patterns. You notice what actually brings you joy versus what you have simply gotten used to. You notice where your self-worth quietly depends on being chosen by someone else, and where it stands on its own. You notice old wounds that a relationship might otherwise paper over: the tendency to overgive, the fear of conflict, the habit of shrinking yourself to keep the peace. None of this is comfortable to look at, chosen one, but looking at it while you have the space to do so, rather than in the middle of a relationship where the stakes are higher and the patterns are harder to see, is a gift, even when it doesn't feel like one. One of the quieter truths about growth, chosen one, is that most of it does not require witnesses. You do not need a partner present to process an old heartbreak, rebuild your confidence, or figure out what kind of life you actually want to live. In fact, trying to do that healing work inside a new relationship often means doing it imperfectly, under pressure, while also trying to manage someone else's feelings about your process. There is real value in doing at least some of that work on your own terms and on your own timeline. This is especially true if you have noticed a pattern repeating itself, the same kind of relationship ending the same way, the same red flags appearing in different people, the same feeling of being drained rather than nourished by connection. Patterns like that are rarely random. They usually point to something worth examining: an old belief about what you deserve, an unconscious comfort with chaos because it is familiar, a habit of choosing people who need fixing because it distracts you from your own life. None of this is meant as self-blame, chosen one. It is simply an invitation. A period without a relationship is one of the few times you can examine these patterns without the complication of also trying to keep a relationship intact while you do it. There is a particular kind of freedom, chosen one, in reaching a point where your sense of purpose and worth is not contingent on romantic partnership. This does not mean pretending you don't want companionship or performing a contentment you don't feel. It means something more practical, building interests, friendships, skills, and a sense of direction that exist regardless of your relationship status. People who arrive at partnership already living a full life tend to bring something different to that partnership than people who are using it to fill a void. They are choosing a partner from a place of abundance rather than scarcity, and that difference tends to show up in how the relationship actually functions. This is also where the unglamorous, practical parts of adult life matter more than they might seem to. Learning to manage your finances well, developing habits that support your physical and mental health, building a community of friends who know and support you, pursuing work or creative projects that matter to you. None of this is about becoming more marketable to a future partner. It is about becoming someone who is genuinely at home in their own life. That kind of groundedness tends to be attractive not because it is designed to be, but because it is rare, and because people can sense when someone is not looking to them to complete something that was missing. Many people, chosen one, carry relationship patterns they inherited without ever choosing them. Maybe you grew up watching a parent stay in a relationship that clearly cost them their peace, and some part of you learned that this is simply what love requires. Maybe you watched conflict get resolved through silence, or through blow-ups, or through someone always being the one to apologize first regardless of who was at fault. These patterns get absorbed early, long before anyone is old enough to evaluate whether they are healthy, and they tend to resurface in adult relationships unless something interrupts them. A period of being single is one of the more effective places to notice and interrupt these inherited patterns, precisely because you are not actively reenacting them with someone else in real time. You have the space to ask honest questions. What did I learn about love that I don't actually agree with? What am I willing to accept that I probably shouldn't? What would it look like to build a relationship that looks nothing like the ones I grew up watching? These are not comfortable questions, chosen one, and they don't always have quick answers. But asking them now, rather than mid-relationship, tends to produce better outcomes later, not because you will arrive at perfect clarity, but because you will at least be choosing consciously, rather than repeating a script you never agreed to. There is enormous social pressure, chosen one, to treat relationship timelines as something you can and should control through sheer effort. Dating more, trying harder apps, saying yes to more setups. Effort matters, and putting yourself in situations where you might meet people is reasonable. But there is a difference between being open to connection and treating partnership as a problem to be solved through willpower and urgency. Relationships formed primarily out of urgency, the sense that you are running out of time, that everyone else is ahead of you, that you need to catch up, tend to carry that urgency with them. They are built on managing anxiety rather than genuine compatibility, and that tends to surface eventually, often at real cost. None of this is a case for passivity. It is a case for distinguishing between healthy effort and anxious urgency. Healthy effort looks like staying open, showing up as yourself, and being willing to take reasonable risks on people who seem worth getting to know. Anxious urgency looks like ignoring red flags because someone is available, or staying in something mediocre because the alternative, being alone a while longer, feels unbearable. The first approach tends to lead somewhere good eventually. The second tends to lead back to where you started, just with more to untangle. If any of this resonates, chosen one, the practical question becomes, what do you actually do with a season like this, beyond simply enduring it? Invest in the parts of your life that have nothing to do with dating. Whatever you have been putting off, a skill you wanted to learn, a project you wanted to start, a health habit you wanted to build, a friendship you let lapse, this is a good time to give it real attention. Not because it will somehow attract a partner, but because a full life is worth having on its own terms, and because the confidence that comes from building something real tends to change how you show up in every part of your life, including future relationships. Get honest about your own patterns, ideally with the help of a therapist, a trusted friend, or simply consistent, honest reflection. The goal is not to diagnose yourself into paralysis, but to understand yourself well enough that you can recognize when old habits are steering a new situation. Self-awareness is not a cure-all, but it is the precondition for almost every other kind of growth. Build community that is not dependent on romantic partnership. Deep friendships, family relationships, and a sense of belonging somewhere are not consolation prizes for not having a partner. They are essential parts of a good life regardless of relationship status, and they tend to make the waiting far less lonely. And be honest, chosen one, about what you actually want, and let that honesty guide your choices rather than fear or comparison. If you know you want a long-term committed relationship, don't talk yourself into pretending you're fine with something casual just because it's available. If you know a particular kind of person or dynamic has hurt you before, don't override that knowledge because you're tired of waiting. Clarity about what you want is not the same as rigidity. It is simply a compass, and it tends to save you time and heartbreak in the long run. None of this is meant to suggest, chosen one, that waiting doesn't hurt, or that loneliness isn't real, or that you should simply be grateful for a season you didn't choose and might not want. Those feelings are valid, and pretending otherwise helps no one. But there is a difference between acknowledging pain and organizing your entire sense of self around it. You can feel the ache of wanting companionship and still recognize that this period of your life is doing something, building capacities, healing old wounds, clarifying what you actually want, even if you can't fully see the shape of that work while you're in the middle of it. Most people, looking back on a period of singleness that once felt endless, describe it less as wasted time and more as a chapter that quietly prepared them for what came next. Not because some grand design was orchestrating a lesson plan, but because time spent knowing yourself is rarely time wasted. Whether or not you believe there is a larger design at work in your life, the practical truth holds either way. The version of you who enters a future relationship having done this work, having built a life, healed what needed healing, and gotten honest about your own patterns, will almost certainly bring more to that relationship than the version of you who was simply trying to escape being alone. So if you are in this season right now, chosen one, and it feels heavier than you know how to say out loud, know this: you are not behind. You are not being punished, overlooked, or forgotten. You are living a real chapter of a real life, and what you do with it, how you treat yourself, what you build, what you heal, matters, regardless of when or whether a relationship follows. That is not a consolation. It is simply the truth, and it is enough to build on.